Hello everyone, it's Oliver Harper here. My guest for this commentary is Paul Gannon. You may recognise him from the Digitiser show, hosted by Mr. Biffo, and his own popular podcast, The Cheap Show. How are you doing today, Paul?
I am not too bad today, thank you for having me.
Now today we are discussing Sudden Death. Now, for those who are familiar with Paul, he is quite obsessed with Ghostbusters, rightly so, because it's a wonderful franchise. But today we're doing something completely different, which is kind of me and Paul had a sort of back and forth about, discussing different films, and Die Hard clones came up as a topic of discussion from Paul, and I said, let's do Sudden Death, and we were both like, yes, let's do that movie. So folks, if you wish to sync your copy of Sudden Death with this commentary, put the timestamp to 0 and press play now.
You know what? I really miss that Universal logo.
Same here. I mean, wonderfully scored by, I think it was Jerry Goldsmith. And
oh, really?
Then Brian Tyler did the new one, as it were.
There's something very comforting about that logo. Sorry, I just like it. It's cozy.
When this film hit the cinema, I mean, this was in the UK it came out in April of 1996. So it was a bit late, 6 months later from the US release, which kind of just came in just before Christmas of '95, and this was during my sort of Van Damme phase, because I was obsessed with collecting all these kind of Van Damme movies at this point in time.
It's a very strange phase to have, but I approve it.
Because this movies were going quite cheap, at the time, like £5 for Cyborg, Bloodsport, Nowhere to Run, and at the time I just got hold of Street Fighter, which is kind of a massive guilty pleasure of mine, and Time Cop came out around the same time on to rent. So I was big into Van Damme, and then I saw adverts for this on Channel 4, this sort of TV trailer spots, and at my local Warner Village they had all the old CRT TV screens showing these massive all these trailer reels, and Sudden Death was on it, but it was slapped with an 18 rating, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to see this, because I was I'll say 14 at the time. Okay. So I was a bit gutted by that, so I had to wait for it to come out on tape and go, Dad, can you please rent this for me? It's like, fuck's sake,
You're the kind of person I had to turn away from the store with their parents when I had to confront them when I worked at Blockbuster. I used to have to ask them, are you buying this for your child to watch? And if they said yes, which they often didn't do because they're not stupid, they wouldn't get a copy.
Oh, that's not fair, man. Wait, see, I went to the ones that are just kind of privately owned sort of businesses where the owner was friends with my dad, so it was just like, yeah, whatever, let him have it.
Fair enough.
I do think this film doesn't really need to have an 18 rating, but
no,
I think there's a couple of swear words, and the guy gets stabbed in the neck with a piece of chicken or something, or chicken bone. That was about it, I think, really. But so Paul, what was your kind of experience with this movie, and your love of the sort of Die Hard clones?
Well, before we get started, I do want to point the attention out to this font, which I call Lethal Weapon font, which was used quite a lot in some 90s films. Because again, there's almost that shorthand with action films where if you affect the style of something you already like, you think you're getting a better quality. And I think you look at the quality of the titles, you think, oh, it's like a die-off. It's like Lethal Weapon or something. Anyway, going off on a tangent. For me, it was just because Die Hard was a film that I think was one of the first 18-rated films I was allowed to watch with my dad. And I instantly fell in love with it because I liked the idea of the underdog battling the baddies and saving the day, and the enclosed location, all the things that people love about Die Hard that we don't need to repeat here particularly are the things that drew me into it. And then after that, because of the success, the genre itself became something appealing to me. So even though I'm not a huge action guy, I didn't watch a lot of action films in the 80s and 90s, the genre of the Die Hard clone was always something that appealed to me. And so just off the top of my head, you can think of the ones that were popular, like Passenger 57 and Under Siege, the only decent Steven Seagal film you're still allowed to watch, without having to defend him. You can just say, it's just Under Siege, it's fine, it's got that scene with the cake and Erica Eleniak or whatever it is. Anyway, so I came across this one because I hadn't known a lot of Van Damme films in general. So I knew of them, I knew he did the Kickboxer and the Bloodsport films, but they to me were the kind of films that were in a corner of a video shop that didn't interest me. They were all Missing in Action or Chuck Norris films, and that didn't interest. So they were kind of there in my peripheral. But again, this one drew me in because it's a Die Hard clone. And I think out of all the Die Hard clones I've seen, this one ranks the highest. It's just it's textbook in many respects. In fact, you can say it's definitely derivative, but at the same time, it's got enough charm and identity of its own that it does stand out. It does stand out from the copious amounts of Die Hard and a ... knockoffs that have been out there. And I think this one's a fun one. I think a part of the reason like this genre of film is interesting to me is that the stakes are high, but there's still a fun quotient, and you've still got to retain that. I think Die Hard 5 shows that if you take out the fun quotient, you just get a horrible, noisy action film.
Well, yeah, with the comparison to sort of some of the other sort of Die Hard clones of the 90s. I mean, Under Siege, you've got Steven Seagal, who is like an ex-military guy who's been demoted, now he's a chef.
Yeah.
But in the case of this one, where we have Jean-Claude Van Damme's character, he's a firefighter who has kind of decided to sort of take a break from that job and sort of become a sort of security guy at this kind of stadium. Obviously suffering from depression and probably feeling like he was to blame for this child's death. We see at the beginning. But throughout the course of the movie, as we see Jean-Claude sort of take on these terrorists, he's by himself. With Under Siege, though, Steven Seagal kind of has a team with him.
He does, yeah.
Throughout. So he doesn't have to sort of he's not the sole guy trying to save the day, and he's kind of stuck on this ship which is kind of surrounded by other military guys who could probably fend for themselves in some way.
Well, that's why the film's not called Lethal Delegation, because that isn't as catchy. But you know what? I think the point that I was probably going to get to, and I think you're getting to as well, is that these films survive on how much you buy the protagonist in the lone soldier role. Because Bruce Willis is genuinely an underdog. You feel the odds against him at the beginning, and you are in his corner fight as he fights his way through. And there's an intelligence to that character, where it's not just gunfighting, and there's desperation involved. Yeah. And then when you get to films that, even though I love, I struggle to get behind the premise sometimes because of who's been cast. I think Van Damme falls into that for me because, yes, he's built like a brick shithouse, and he has all the nice kicking moves, and he can stretch his legs, and he's handsome. But what I think saves him in this role particularly is that I've always seen him as a bit of a nerd, Van Damme. It's like, even though, his reputation, his love life, his drug taking, all those kind of stories in the background form a part of him. On screen, even in some of his tougher roles, he's still kind of gawky. And he's very gawky in this, and I think that's what sells it more than anything else. He's allowed to be a bit more of a nerd, which means that when he starts fighting back, you do feel for him. You feel he's got some there.
Van Damme's very good. Actually, it's very similar to what Stallone does. Is that sort of like puppy dog eyes? Sort of, you can get the audience to be on his side very quickly. And I think these sort of moments here is where he's trying to, because he's obviously separated from his wife, and he just turns up to say, "Hey, look, do you want to take, to his kids, do you want to come and watch this hockey game?"
Yeah.
And his wife is obviously very standoffish, but we see very clearly on that the kids still love their father and want to be with him, and this is the opportunity to go do something, and they'd rather do that than go have a boring meal with their stepdad.
Yeah.
That sort of scene that isolates a little moment where you're on Van Damme's side straight away, and we see sort of play out that his role, which he kind of it's kind of a glorified title role he has at the hockey arena, but all he's doing is sort of changing light bulbs, and it's kind of slightly demeaning to him. Yeah. So we're kind of further on his side till he sort of has to save the day and go above and beyond.
Well, that's what makes it different from, like, again, going back to Seagal and Under Siege, is that his status isn't a human one. It's a role he's been given. He was a Navy SEAL, but now he's a chef, so it's a status thing that he's been reduced to. It's not like his character is an underdog, so to speak. It's more like the film is saying you're going to underestimate this killing machine, whereas in good Die Hard clones, they underestimate the fact that they underestimate him because he looks feeble. Yeah. Does that make sense? So I think in this, again, the villains in this see him as like John McClane, a fly in the ointment. He is just something to get rid of, and they underestimate that. And I think the best successful Die Hard clones have that sense of leveling up as a character.
Yeah, definitely. Also with this, with Jean-Claude in this, I mean, he's not showing off his muscles. He wears his outfit like his kind of security outfit throughout the entire course of the movie, to the very end where he has to wear the sort of white shirt. Especially, he's not wearing like a wife beater shirt like McClane does, but it's sort of white shirt by the end. So they're downplaying his action image
Yeah.
And as we see throughout the movie, he's kind of dials back using his high flying kicks. You know, he does the old kick now and again, but it's not over the top at all. You know?
No, because I think, again, what makes Die Hard work in that it is some of the fight scenes are very clunky, like very awkward on purpose. You know, the first fight with, I can never remember his name. Not Carl, is it? It's Cole's brother. Anyway, Cole's brother, the first terrorist to get killed, is an incredibly awkward and reasonably stupid fight scene. And I think there's some of that in this, is that even though, we do know Van Damme can do all the kickies, he's still bumbling in some of the fight scenes. You know, it's still claustrophobic, and it's still, it's got that Indiana Jones quotient to it, where I like thinking on the spot. You know, that's more exciting to me than a guy who can kick someone's ass. And it just helps the fight scene as well, to know that it feels like it is life and death, and it is an awkward, weird struggle, and it's not a slick shoot 'em up.
Yeah, I think the fight scenes certainly are, as your sort of comparison to Die Hard, are certainly more slick in this, due to the fact that Jean-Claude can do more, action on screen than Bruce Willis. But Bruce Willis, the Die Hard fights are kind of more like street brawls, aren't they? Because you sort of get the sense that McClane's kind of a bit of a street fighter in his day, I suppose. Also, being a cop on the beat, he has to sort of throw the odd punch, I suppose, now and again.
Yeah.
But because this film never had any sort of special edition, there's no sort of audio commentary to the movie. There's very kind of loose information about how the movie sort of came together. And I reviewed it years ago, and it wasn't still now today. There wasn't much on it. I've looked through loads of interviews with Peter Hyams, and time cop seems to be the topic of discussion, and not sudden death, which is kind of a shame. But this was kind of based on a spec script called Arena, which is then it's sort of the writer of the movie, who also I presume did the screenplay or developed it, has sort of said that it was going to be an action parody, and you can kind of see where they're going with it. But I suppose with Last Action Hero from 2 years before being essentially a parody on the genre, it may have been just like, okay, this is kind of, what's the point?
It is interesting in that action films are the hardest to spoof, I think, in some respects, and very few people get it right intentionally. I would say maybe like Hot Shots Part 2 does it really well.
Loaded Weapon 1?
And Loaded Weapon 1 is probably the other one, even though that's probably where I put my finger. I poke my finger in and I say, that's when spoof movies started getting terrible. I think at that point when National Lampoon started doing spoofs, and then you had Scary Movie, Date Movie, all those, is like, oh, they've lost the subtlety of what makes a spoof work.
Yeah.
And again, this, I mean, you can see how this is, to some extent, in regards to the extra features and the information about the film. I think the reason why there's not that much is because I think it is such a Die Hard clone, and I think it was made in that respect. A lot of talent, a lot of energy, a lot of fun. It's a good script, a lot of good action, but I think it is just good, and that's not a bad thing. But also, I think it means it doesn't linger.
Yeah,
it's like, especially when you've heard the stories of how many other Die Hard sequels were made and things. I think this felt like, not in a negative way, but a by the numbers movie production. And I think, as I say, it's one of my favourite Die Hard clones. It is beat for beat Die Hard, but it's got enough charm and identity of its own that it gets by.
I mean, this moment here is where Van Damme has sort of, showing his kid the hockey players, and they're sort of speaking in French. Obviously, I think it's trying to imply that Jean-Claude's character is kind of French-Canadian as well, sort of get away with the accent. But that moment there sort of shows he's actually somebody's better acting abilities, because he seems actually very natural when he's interacting with them. Also, he can speak in his native tongue, but he can. It just shows that he's kind of he fits more within it. Doesn't seem so stilted.
Well, these are the important parts of any. Well, I say Die Hard clone, but any good action film is your first 20 to 25 minutes. You've got to do enough there before you get to your first action scene to warrant your investment in that role. So, what I like about this is that, even though it's a bit on the nose, I like the 2 hours till kickoff. 45 minutes till, it's not kickoff because this is ice hockey. So whatever they call it.
It's a countdown they have. It's like a countdown in the background, isn't it?
And the ticking clock is also really quite effective in this film. So it drives the narrative even as it's setting up its stalls, because it kind of feels like everything's slotting into place quite nicely. Whereas in Die Hard, there's a surprise almost element when the terrorists turn up. This one is very much here's everything slotting into place. The countdown kicks off, and the movie does at the same time, and that's what I think helps it get through what could be a very generic first 20 odd minutes.
Yeah, as we've sort of seen throughout the years when they've sort of talked about the sort of Die Hard sequels. I think maybe 2 of them are sort of scripts based on other movies that were kind of shifted into being something else. Actually, with Die Hard with a Vengeance was going to be sort of sequel to Brandon Lee's Rapid Fire.
Yeah, it was
Simon going to be called
Says,
Simon Says.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these kind of, I think maybe even Lethal Weapon. Some of those movies are kind of tooled into other scripts that were kind of changed to be something else.
You know what? It's one of the funniest things about movies, action movies specifically at that time, is how many stories you hear about making ofs that begin with, well, this was originally a script for Lethal Weapon 5, or this was originally Commando 2, or this was originally Predator 4, but then it got retooled and now it's called Baby's Day Out. You know, it's that kind of... You know, it's that development. And I think the Die Hard sequels are really interesting in that. So... obviously, this is not going to be a Die Hard commentary, but I do want to just get this off my chest. So, Die Hard 1, based on the book Nothing Lasts Forever, interesting in that you could kind of remake that now with Bruce Willis in the role because it'd be age appropriate. You know, the character was meant to be in his 60s in the time of the original Die Hard book. Anyway, you get the second film based on that, what was it called, 48 Minutes or whatever it was called. And then you've got Die Hard 3, which is the spec script, which is Simon Says. Then you get to Die Hard 4, which is weirdly based on a Time article called... what was it called? www.war or something like that. It was.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And then you get to Die Hard 5, which is the unequivocally. You know what? I'm just going to say. I'm not going to say unequivocally because I can't. But it's the very worst Die Hard. And yeah, they were raving about how it's the first original script for the franchise, and yet everything about it gets the character, the location, the situation, the shot wrong. Yeah. So when you look at this and you look at Sudden Death, you appreciate it because it feels fresher than Die Hard 5.
This could have been, a moment where John McClane goes to see an ice hockey game, and it all just kicks off, and it says, it's happened again, But then it would kind of be, I suppose the argument was, with the sort of further Die Hard sequels after number 3, which had such a great cut-off point to end the trilogy, I think. Where to go next? But Die Hard 4, which is, I actually quite like a lot of Die Hard 4, actually.
I'm fond of Die Hard 4 because it's not pretentious in that, unlike Die Hard 5, which is like, we're going to blow the doors off, which I actually think Bruce Willis says every time he makes a sequel to Die Hard. He goes, this is going to blow you through the back of the theatre or blow the walls off. It's like, yeah, I think you've said that 4 times now, Bruce. Anyway, there's nothing cynical particularly about Die Hard 4 in my mind.
I just one thing to point out is the ESPN logo, which I love in this movie because it reminds me of the old Sky One and Sky Movies idents, that kind of 90s graphics, or probably done on Amigas or something like that.
It's again, that's what places it so nicely, in the era when this is made. Because I don't know too much about the director, but even looking at this visually, I think it's got a lot of Die Hard. Whether it's subconscious or not, but it feels framed like Die Hard.
Well, this is directed by Peter Hyams, who directed Capricorn 1, Outland with Sean Connery.
I love Outland.
Because if you look at Outland and this, and Time Cop, that kitchen interior, very smoky look to it, which he kind of brings over in a lot of these films. And he did The Relic, End of Days. End of Days was probably Peter Hyams' most successful movie, but I think it got panned a lot by the critics. But Time Cop was the one that made Jean-Claude Van Damme, that was his most popular movie at the box office.
The strange thing about Van Damme is that it kind of felt, to me at that time, who vaguely knew of him, is that he lived a double life. He was a B-movie actor in things like kicky kick fight films, or he was in these slick, high-budget, high-concept action films like Time Cop. And so it felt like there were 2 versions of him you could like. There's the entry level, which is Time Cop and Sudden Death and whatnot. And then you've got the kind of, all the kind of canon stuff that he did on Contract.
Yes.
And it's weird how they brush up against each other because they're very different portrayals of his character, apart from maybe Kickboxer and such, where he's slightly dorky still.
Yeah, I think we sort of see this sort of transition for him with things like, I think probably Nowhere to Run and Universal Soldier, where you sort of getting these bigger sort of movies, like Universal Soldier especially, kind of a high concept movie, and then it's kind of followed on by Hard Target, and because the deal we had with Universal, this was like the one after this was The Quest, which he directed.
That's with Roger Moore.
That was Roger Moore, yeah. He hated that film. It's some great stories about that film. But that was the last of the Universal pictures he did. And then he jumped onto Sony, did things like Knock Off and Double Team, which were kind of massive box office bombs. I think Double Team was probably the biggest of his
Was that with Dennis
failures.
Rodman?
Yes, that's right.
Oh God, I remember that film. It makes me feel nauseous now thinking about it. I don't know what it is about that film, but it's 90s in all the worst ways. But I don't even know if it was made in the 90s. I might be wrong.
Yeah, it was. It was 1997, I think. It was.
Oh, I think I remember seeing a picture, like a billboard for it, when I was traveling through France around that time. That's the only memory I have of that film. I've not seen it, but that's my feeling. It just makes me nauseous.
I mean, it also goes into the sort of usual thing we see with actors, or I suppose action stars who aren't particularly well known for their acting abilities. Often get their best performances when they work with a very good director. In the case of Van Damme, it's Peter Hyams with Time Cop and Sudden Death, and then with Arnold, it's clearly like James Cameron, and probably John McTiernan. But it's and then the same with Stallone. I mean, Stallone is kind of, well, he directs his own movies as well, so he always kind of gives you what he kind of wants himself. But we see that sort of similar things happen with these actors, and obviously when you see Van Damme with other directors, he can be a bit like stiff and and a bit wonky in areas. But this, he sort of, it's far more natural.
Yeah, the interesting thing I think about the direction of this is that it's not particularly showy. It does do the action playbook, note for note. I think I've muddled up 7 different metaphors there, but it's clean. You can understand the fight choreography, which is always a big letdown in some of these films. And you know what's going on at any one time. I mean, one of the important things about a film like this is if you've got a rat scurrying through a maze, you want to get an idea of the geography of the building so you can kind of understand the situation. And I think, again, I don't know too much about Peter Hyams' work other than the films I have seen of his, but they all come across to me as, oh God, this is going to sound bad. I don't want to say workmanlike in the worst way. I just mean it looks like a shored hand, Everything about this is clean, but it has that die-hard look still.
Yeah, definitely. It's thankfully the movie is actually very coherent, and you can follow the story very clearly with his direction. There is, in the case of Die Hard, we have McClane essentially going up and down this kind of tower. Where Jean-Claude is kind of just working his way around the arena, through the maintenance areas, all the pipes and stuff, and sort of the office compartments till he gets to the very top to then come in to attack the president. What was it? It was the office section, wasn't it? What's what he jumps into? What they call it?
Isn't the
VIP box?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Because you've got to have your hero dangle from an explosion in one of your Die Hard clones. That's textbook. That's in the book.
Roger Ebert said it was interesting that because Roger Ebert gave it a pretty good review. He said it was it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was an entertaining movie. We just have to sort of it's not there to take itself too seriously. Despite actually the direction of it it tries to ground itself in reality. It doesn't seem very fantastical in areas. He said that why would the vice president be in this VIP box and not be seen by the public, because he's supposed to be there to be seen by the public, and he just hides in this box. It kind of makes no sense. But I think that's kind of a slight nitpick. I think.
I agree, because one of the things I think we do have to talk about is the strength of these films also relies on its villain, and Powers Booth is a great villain because from the minute he walks onto the set, you want to punch him. He's smarmy and arrogant and self-assured. It's that other weird trope about Die Hard clones where you've got to have this villain who is maybe intellectually at the very least way above your protagonist, and so obviously everyone looks to Hans Gruber for this, and some films do better when they stray away from that, which I think to some extent Die Hard 2 did quite well in that it didn't try and do Gruber again. It went for a more kind of aggressive military tone, and in this you've got a great villain. But I mean, as much as I enjoy Passenger 57, I'm not quite sure the villain in that works. I never remember the guy's name. Is it Julian? It's not Julian Sands, is it? That's going to really annoy me.
We'll have to come back to that bit. But Powers Booth's character is, he's a corrupt police officer or sergeant.
That's right.
So he's not. It's not a. I mean, it's just a. Okay, instead of having a terrorist in a classical sense, or like a professional terrorist who's there to steal money, that is his only goal. I mean, they both have the same goal. But Powell Smoothes comes from, essentially, he's supposed to be a good guy, and he's now corrupt, and it shows you the system itself is corrupt.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a, classic switcheroo. I mean, we've had so many films where the bad guy is always like a corrupt cop, so it's not...
Well, like The Rock,
original,
isn't it? Rock, you've got Ed Harris. Is it Ed Harris? Yes, it's Ed Harris. And, he's a military guy who came back from the war and was betrayed by his country, and so he's making this... Well, again, the other Die Hard trope is political terrorism masking actual heist. You know what I mean? It's like there's always that sense of the twist. And I don't think this has that. I don't think so. It has a few character
I don't think
reveals.
it has any twist, doesn't it? Because the twist could have been that there was bombs that we aren't aware of. I mean, the only person, because the twist is, I don't know. I mean, I don't think. Yeah, there's no twist at all. No. It's just it's very clear what the Powers Booth's character is going to do. If he doesn't get the money, he's going to blow it up.
Yeah, it's selfish and greedy, and he thinks he's going to get away with it because he's got the upper hand, and that's where you start, chipping away at that with your human. What a stupid thing to say. Obviously, it's human. It's sort of cat film with your, with your hero going on an adventure where he levels up and finally meets the big boss at the end, and they're at a point where they're level. One's been chipped away and one's been built up, and it's just, as I say, it's a satisfying watch because there is a lot to enjoy with this.
Well, apparently this is supposed to be set in New York, but it's also like Pittsburgh, from what I read. They've, for the whole hockey match, I think they set up an exhibition match.
Yeah.
And to capture the footage over a couple of days. Maybe a sort of keep playing to get everything done, but to fill out the arena, they had to sort of have a lot of cardboard cutouts of people just shoved in, because they've got 3,000 extras, but to fill out 17,000. Yeah. No way you're going to get that amount of people in just to shoot this, these, I suppose, second unit material. I do like later on this guy who's obviously monitoring the transaction, starts playing Doom.
Yeah,
on his laptop.
It's all those little affectations which really kind of make this fun. Because I think, again, one of the things that Die Hard does is that it does give as much character as possible to the other terrorists in the group. So they are recognisable. And I think you do need something like that in films like this, because otherwise it becomes a slaughter fest, of miscellaneous villains with masks or whatever. You've got to give your characters some kind of interaction with these people, because it's meant to be an intimate action film. And I think the bigger these films get, the less that intimacy works. I think one of the reasons why Die Hard 3 works, despite its vast canvas, is because it does manage to find places for McClane to go that are claustrophobic. You've got the subway and the ins and outs of the boat and the massive water tunnel scene. So you've got signifiers of the Die Hard films in those. And then you get to Die Hard 5. God, I'm going to be railing on that a lot, I've realised. It's a mess, in terms of the geography. It's a mess in terms of the intention. It's just a broad mess. But it thinks it's doing Die Hard because it's giving you those little moments without any sense of why those moments worked originally.
Yes. True. I mean, it's Die Hard 3, when you open things up for the character as well, because we got to see more of who he works with. So it's like a prime opportunity to sort of have that just be, instead of being confined to one area. And that's you have to show with progression, because you just end up essentially being repetition and the same thing over and over again. By Die Hard 3, there's already had been a number of clones of Die Hard, so they couldn't be copying the clone.
No, that is the other interesting thing about it, is that once you've, it's the old joke, isn't it? I can't say old joke. I think the writer of Die Hard, D'Souza, I'm always fuzzy with names and facts without them.
Stephen E. D'Souza, yeah.
Yeah, I think he said he was offered loads of Die Hard clones. And he said one meeting he went to see an executive, and he went, "We want you to do a Die Hard film, but this one is Die Hard in a building." And I think he just laughed at the ridiculousness of being pitched that and walked away. So, but that's the thing. It's like, you think of something that exists and you could do a Die Hard in it. It's like Die Hard in a lift, Die Hard in a boat, Die Hard in a train, Die Hard in a plane. It's just about finding an enclosed location, baddies, and a hero, and hoping that it works.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Harrison Ford had his take at it with Air Force One, which I wouldn't say is kind of a Die Hard clone. It's got elements of a Die Hard sort of scenario.
Going into the skies was terrifying in the 90s because you had Executive Decision, you had Con Air, you had Passenger 57, you had Air Force One. It was like, no, you know what? Terrorists just love airplanes. And then, you know, amusing as that is, when you have 9/11 happen, all of that suddenly comes very either distasteful or becomes uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah.
Because of how the real life ramifications of it. And it's like,
because action movies after that, they will never feature a plane accident of that sort of, you know, an action movie featuring a plane for a while.
No, I remember that there was, I mean, I wasn't working for Blockbuster at the time, but I remember hearing in America they started labelling their action films if they had plots similar to something that happened in 9/11.
Really?
And the thing is, if you know, bung Die Hard 1, 2 and 3 together, you do have 9/11 practically in a trilogy nutshell. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's since then, I think the Die Hard clones that have come since have gone out of their way to try and either over-politicise the reason behind the terrorists' intentions, or they underplay it, where it ends up just being motley criminals.
I think to me the use of terrorists was a reflection of the times. You know, the Cold War had ended and technology was becoming this new weapon. Instead of starting a new war by invading countries or arming rebels to stir unrest, the enemies were going to hack your database or steal the money not by breaking into a bank, but instead using the internet to steal it that way. It just seemed fresh and contemporary, I suppose.
I think, you know, I mean, my theory has been, and I don't know if I've overheard this by more intelligent people, or that if it's intelligence at all, but it feels like to me, it's like in the 80s, America didn't really have any proper enemies, and so it invented them in their action films to be like Euro trash. It had this idea, like, you know, like you look at Lethal Weapon 2, and I mean, there's probably more better examples.
It's South Africans, isn't it? In Lethal Weapon 2, you know.
But there's always that sense of, especially in Die Hard clones, that there's always that Euro trash terrorist element, the kind of suave, smug. And I think, like, because America did have Russia, and you see films like Red Dawn and such, you know, and how that was even portrayed in Rambo and is it Living Daylights? The whole thing about the Taliban and the Russians and things like that.
Yes,
you can see
Rambo
it was like
3 as well.
You can see it's basically Hollywood not knowing what they were talking about, and so I think they came up with Euro trash because it was an easy villain to say it's the other.
There was an interesting comparison on it, or like discussion on it in the film JCVD.
Okay,
where they obviously kind of a semi sort of. Have you seen that film?
I haven't. No.
It's one of his best movies, one of his best performances. But there's two guys in it talk about the villains in action movies, and they're all saying, because these guys are from Afghanistan, I think, and they're all saying, "Oh, we're the bad guys now," you know. So it's like in things like True Lies, they sort of started to change the villains. But in the case of Sudden Death, you know, it's their own people against them. So it's got homegrown sort of terrorist.
And I mean, I can't. When was this film? 96.
This is 95.
95.
Yeah, it came out in 96 in the UK, but it's a 95 kind of movie.
So the other big event that happened that affected action movies was the Oklahoma bombing.
Yes,
you know, Timothy McVeigh and all that thing. I mean, that had a massive effect. So I think that happened right before Die Hard 3 came out. So it's something like that. So, you know. It's troubling because I think there was the Euro trash element, but there also was the homegrown terrorist element. And they either were angry at their country or they wanted to profit from the sins of other American corporations. Die Hard has a bit of that, but then, you know, the interesting thing about that is that in many respects, some of the things we complain about in action movies, it was intentionally exploiting for its plot. So you have all these terrorists walk in that want to frighten America, but they're using that as a smokescreen, that fear that Americans have, to just get away with, you know, bearer bonds, you know, and when you think about the actions of what they do, they're trying to build in a tragedy into their escape, and so it all becomes on trading on America's fears. And I think The Rock is another example of that. Again, we're talking about, you know, the military being, you know, treated like it was when they come back from war, and then turning on their country. And this, obviously, it's a very extreme example, but America's always had a tough time, like, you know, juggling who they want their villains to be. And I think even now you look at like the Fast and the Furious, and they're more like Bond films now, where you can't just have a villain. You have to have a villain who practically runs an Dr. Evil lair with gadgets and their own crew. It becomes more like G.I. Joe now, where everything's nebulous. Sure. It is just good versus evil.
Yeah, yeah. And this is obviously coming up relatively shortly, is the great battle with the lady, the penguin outfit, who's like, must be like 7 foot. I mean, Jean-Claude's not a particularly tall guy, is he? I think he's like 5'10", maybe, something like that.
I love this little scene where he's bumping into people where it's like, be clumsy, and but you love your daughter and you're still apologetic, and because there is a lovely sense in these little moments. Again, when a film does it right, there's a cascade. It's about how do you get your hero into a position where they're the only person who can save the day, right?
Yeah.
And this scene now is the cascade into that, where effectively he's just looking after his daughter. He's not a detective. He hasn't seen some giveaway clue. He just wanders into this nightmare. And I think that's why you follow him on from that point, because he's there to save one person, and then he ends up having to save thousands.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the little girl who plays his daughter, Whitney Wright, I mean, she actually does a surprisingly good performance with the sort of having to sort of act terrified.
Yeah.
Especially in front of Powers Booth, who says later on he threatens to put spiders in her mouth, to sort of make her sort of tell her what her dad's up to, or where is he.
It reminds me weirdly, that scene of in Monster Squad where Dracula lifts up the girl and he goes, "Give me the amulet, you bitch!" Right to her face. I thought that was an incredibly aggressive moment, and it was fundamentally still a kids' film.
Yeah.
But it really makes you just realise that, oh, boo, he hates little kids. And you think, he's a bad un.
I was never a fan of the lad who plays his son, because he's written and directed to be basically a bit of a brat. And I remember seeing him. He was in Seinfeld, playing. Well, I think it was maybe a couple of years after this, where he'd attempted to kiss Elaine, and then they thought he was a man then because he kissed Elaine.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been in that many things. But I think the little girl, she did a couple of acting gigs after this and sort of stopped for a long time.
It's weird.
As most kids do. They go into education.
It is funny how you see all these kids who are chewed up through action films. You see 2 or 3 the same child actors in these movies, and then they disappear, or they end up in Christian movies. Weirdly, that's the other kind of weird thing that happens. But going back to what you were saying, the more I look at it now, it's like, you're right. You could easily make this Lucy McLean right now. You could easily have that, because that's something that the later sequels of Die Hard traded on badly, because the vulnerability wasn't really there. They just became Princess Peaches to save.
Because for John McClane, he's throughout the sequels, by number 4, he was becoming a Superman. Sort of doing his death-defying leaps. And if this was a Die Hard, say Die Hard 4, it would have kind of I think it would have worked, because it would have introduced his daughter as well. Yeah. And this would have been seeing her at a younger age instead of seeing her in her late teens. And we never got that sort of family, because his wife's in 1 and 2, and she's only on the phone in number 3, and so we never get to see the rest of his children till later on. I think that would have been a good sort of middle act, but then if they did that, we wouldn't have this with Van Damme. So
can I just say as well, this is, considering how ridiculous this scene is, they pull it off, because those really shots of the dead-eyed thing just staring off away is really effective. Because it's dumb.
I love when he puts like the chili sauce in her eyes as well. It's great.
It's dumb, but again, at the same time, it's like, it's creepy, and it's all going to kick off. But you're right, they play down a lot. I mean, apart from this, I guess. I wonder how much they pulled back on Van Damme being a proper Van Damme in it.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like when I saw this as a kid on VHS, sort of a pan and scan kind of TV version. I was thought, this is all Van Damme doing this. But when I saw this in HD, I was like, there's a lot of moments where Van Damme's using a double for some really shots I think would be relatively easy for him.
Yeah.
And I thought, it must be this was during his cocaine binge, spending like snorting up 10 grams a day up his schnoz.
Can you imagine being on cocaine during this film?
Probably, he would just have the energy levels, or he's just like completely just worn down. But yeah, because as you're saying, sort of the fight scenes, yeah, he's not. It's not nothing too flamboyant. It's nothing too over the top. It's all very much kind of close quarter, just a knee jab or a punch, and then and the odd kick. But so I like how they're not trying to show you that this firefighter is, just surprisingly a martial artist as well.
Yeah,
they try and make it a little bit more grounded.
I wonder if they use stunts for him in certain respects, because there is a lot of prop moments in the fight, the boiler, the meat cutter, and things like that. I wonder if, because there must be a reason about contracts and stuntmen and when you can put your star in front of a dangerous prop and things. And I wonder if that's like, when you hear of Jackie Chan coming to America and going, why can't I do my stunts? Because they let me do it in China. Why is there a stuntman doing this thing I can easily do? I wonder if it's just that. It's just like a kind of health and safety.
You could be right, Paul. I mean, because I think later on in like Knockoff, which was kind of filmed in Hong Kong, I do recall seeing Van Damme doing more stuff within camera. So I thought, okay, maybe that might be the case.
Yeah. It's I say it gets by this scene by showing that he's capable enough to hold on to himself. But I think this is one of the only fight scenes, because the rest of it tends to be pushing and shoving and gunfighting, if I remember rightly. But it has been a while. It has been a while, to be fair.
But yeah, he starts using like a machine gun, like a silencer on it, so like an Uzi later on. So it does become a little bit more sort of action-packed, sort of traditional kind of action movie. But yeah, I think you may be right. That may be the only sort of fighty, kicky moment we see. And seeing that moment there where the woman's getting strangled and pulled into that sort of dishwasher.
Yeah.
Van Damme's face is just like, holy shit, what's going on here? Something's going down. So, we are getting a sort of a person who's unsure what's going on and terrified of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And obviously concerned about his daughter's safety.
But this is always the interesting point, though, in these kind of films, is like what the character does next really sells the concept of the film. So in Die Hard, you've seen him try to call for help, you've seen him act desperately, he ends up in this fight scene, and what he decides to do next, because he's going to get caught, is to highlight his appearance and use it as a smokescreen to say there's more of us. Or am I wrong? I think in the book he implies there's a load of them. It's like, now we have machine guns. I think it's something like that. But in the film, it's just, now I have. Either way, I don't know why I brought that.
But in Sudden Death, he does that as well, doesn't he? He does say that he doesn't admit that he's by himself. He says there's, I have, I think he says I have others, something like that. So obviously he's all a smokescreen. But also, it's another classic trait of these movies, that something bad happens, and Van Damme goes and speaks to one of the security guards who's also a bad guy. So he's just like,
you kind of have to, otherwise the film's over real quick. He's like, sometimes you just want to see an action film where it's like, I gotta get help. Oh no, suspicious character with shades takes them off. Yeah, you looking for help? Yeah. And you think, oh no, he's going to be a bad guy. He's going to try and shoot the goodie. He's like, no, all right, yeah, I'll just call in the police. The army will get me in a sec. You sit down, you've done enough, mate. I mean, one murder on your hands is a terrible thing for a civilian to go through. So just calm down. We'll get you some counselling. Instead, you have to get your character used to killing people. That's kind of
exactly.
Always the weird thing. It's like, do you remember Toy Soldiers?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That has a Die Hard premise, but I remember it being not very Die Hard at the end of the day. I
remember it not being very good. I was very disappointed with it. I saw it at the cinema because I thought, Joe Dante, he's back, yes! And I went to see it and I was like, I was kind of gutted.
Oh, no, that's Small Soldiers.
I'm talking about Small Soldiers.
Toy Soldiers.
Yeah, Toy Soldiers. Oh my God. My memory completely gone there.
I had a minute for a minute ago. Did Joe Dante direct that? Am I going mad? Action films don't seem his forte. But but that's like kids become the Die Hard, the John McClanes, and when the terrorists take over the posh public school. And I remember that shocking me because the kids had to kill, and I don't think it really dealt with that very well. But then there's that whole scene where I believe it's Will Wheaton gets shot up in the courtyard. I believe so, but I hated him on Star Trek, so I really liked that scene. Poor old Will Wheaton.
It's a classic moment when the villain gives away his identity. He goes, "Oh, you didn't say that. You didn't say her name, did you?"
That's I call this the Hans Gruber moment. Where he meets him on the rooftop. I know it happens much later in Die Hard, but this is the scene where it's like, "Hey, I'm come to help you. Oh, I'll save you from those 13 terrorists. I never mentioned 13. Whatever it is." So yeah, so this fight is a little bit more kind of grubby, I guess, or a little bit more kind of.
I think he certainly becomes like Van Damme's character becomes far more aggressive very quickly. He's quick speed. He's kneed him in the stomach and just thrown him into the side, now burning his skin off.
Yay! That's what you got to do. But it's like he's not doing the kicky stuff. It's more of the brutish. I need information. Yeah, I got to keep you alive until that character's done with, and so you can kill him.
I actually love the photography in this whole sequence. It's because Peter Hyams photographs his own movies as well, which doesn't
it's very rare.
Which didn't go down. It's very rare. It doesn't go down particularly well with the unions. So he's not. I don't think he's part of the ASC. So he's sort of a bit of an outsider in that regard. I think Steven Soderbergh photographs some of his other movies.
I get the impression he's a bit of a one-man band in many respects. I think it's interesting because I remember enjoying Outland a lot when I watched it because it has that high noon thing, which is another one of those cinema tropes I quite like, the preparing yourself for the big finale kind of thing. And what is interesting about Outland is because I can't remember when it was, the early 80s Outland, like 80, 81.
81.
So
81,
you'd seen Star Wars, you'd seen Blade Runner, an Alien, yeah. And this still manages to have that quaint sci-fi look that existed just before those films came out. But he makes it really work because just like Aliens, it feels lived in. So he does have, ability to fill a frame with a lived-in world.
I also Outland sort of belonged in the same universe as Alien because there's a similar somewhat production design. So it's like, okay, there's no aliens in this movie, but off a moon near Jupiter, Sean Connery's taking on these dudes who are trying to kill him.
I love. I don't know. It shows what my brain's like. But when I think about that film, I don't think about the action scenes and the conversations. I think about the one scene where he's playing golf. He's got that weird golf machine. Because I remember thinking at the time, Sean Connery wrote that in the script.
I think it's his boss. It's his boss that plays golf, isn't it? And then Sean Connery plays squash.
Oh, maybe, yeah. That's right, I still see. And then years later, we had the Nintendo Wii. So they saw the future, and that was it. But Time Cop as well is another one that I think I remember enjoying, but having way too many problems with the logic of the film.
When you're dealing with time travel, I think you can pick it apart very easily. But it was, even at the time, in 1994, when it came out, in the future of 2004, there's time travel, but also they have cars that look like ginormous dishwashers driving around. It's just like, what the hell? Who would design these cars? I think they're designed by Sid Mead, I think, and there's a bit off. I believe so. I think it was Sid Mead who worked. I think it was a futurist kind of, concept designer. It looked a bit off, but Time Cop again is a great concept movie.
Yeah,
that worked really well at the time. But I think if you go back to it, it is a bit dated. But it's Van Damme having a mullet, so you can't go wrong. You can't
really go wrong with that. I mean, that's the only thing this film is lacking is the mullet. But to be fair, I think he needs to be clean shaven for this. Yes. I think he needs to be that typical everyman. And I think that's why they cover him in the security guard stuff so much, because they have to hide his completely ripped physique. Because you can't. It's like Stallone in Cliffhanger. Actually, it's like I adore a Cliffhanger. I think it might be my second favorite Die Hard knockoff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because everything about it works, and yet it's not completely a carbon copy. I like the fact that it's completely open because it's set in the mountains, the Rockies, but yet it uses that to show real danger that can come from anywhere, above, below. You can fall off a cliff, so everything feels like it's on a knife edge. The score is absolutely fantastic for that film.
Oh, Trevor Jones,
yeah,
good composer.
Every time I hear that music, I'm surprised it belongs to an action film because it feels more like Lawrence of Arabia kind of thing.
Yeah, it does. Oh, actually, talking about the music, I mean, this is scored by John Debney, who I think went on to End of Days, done Passion of the Christ. He's became a popular choice of composer throughout the noughties, and recently did the Orville TV show, which is kind of really goes back to the classic kind of composing of our 80s little sci-fi action movies used to be like. But this is one of my favourite action scores, really. This is early on in John Debney's career. It's really good driving sort of percussion. and beat to it, a bit of like orchestral stuff mixed with synthesizers. It's just a really good piece.
It's funny actually, because this is, I think, one of the last of the classic action movie scores. Because then after this, I think like Speed and Bad Boys, when that is it Mark Mancini? I always get his name.
Yeah, Mark Mancini. Yeah.
His scores came in. I think they really changed that, and Michael Bay coming onto the scene as well.
Yes,
really kind of changed gears in action films at that point on. And I think this was.
I think it was at the time. It was it was very sort of contemporary, and people loved this new new kind of approach to action scores. Where definitely, as you say, Mark Mancini and probably Hans Zimmer were the driving force behind it all.
Yeah,
with Trevor Rabin, maybe something like that. But a lot of these people have worked with Zimmer, so they're all kind of like they sort of. Trained by Zimmer, worked closely with him. They went off and did their own thing. And then you ended up with a lot of scores sounding very much the same because they all kind of followed Hans Zimmer's approach to action scores.
Yeah, Zimmer's approach is more kind of it's more driven by percussion, isn't it? It's got those stabs and beats and the drumming and the kind of. And I find this music when it works really effective. Like I think his score for like the first Pirates movie is really good, for example. But then some of it, I don't know. I mean, his stuff for Nolan works, but then when it's used everywhere, like I was surprised, and maybe this is a compliment actually, but I was surprised he scored Wallace and Gromit and The Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
Yes. I mean, he did a very good job with that, but it's also the shame like the original composer of those, animated things could have done it himself confidently. It's just a name. They needed a big name composer.
Yeah, and I think this is the last of the classic '90s action films.
I think you're right. Paul. Yeah, that's why I listen to it quite a lot. But with the album itself for this only has 30 minutes of music. Very typical of soundtracks of the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, all these shots here, the kind of nice shots of the helicopters hovering around the building, that's Die Hard. Because it's even got that Die Hard lens flare, which I don't know was just a product of the time. But like, when I think of Die Hard, the palette I think of are like silvers and dark blues and lens flares, and and this has those moments. You can see the way they've lit it, the way the colour of the film is blue. It's almost slightly washed out.
You're always going to look at these films where they do have the lens flare. You think, was that a mistake or was that intended to be there? Because often the case for some directors, it's like or the cameraman, they're like, that's a mistake. We shouldn't have a lens flare because that shows that it's been filmed. It's not supposed to happen.
I think it depends. I mean, I look. I don't know how to make a film.
J.J. Abrams uses it to
all over the place.
Effect.
Yeah,
he's like blinding his audience.
I'm surprised when people smile, lens flare don't come out of their mouth in his films. That's how I think he overuses it. But
it's like if you were on the Enterprise on J.J. Abrams' movie, I think you just have a migraine after half an hour. You'd be like, oh God, I've had too much.
Yeah,
I've had too much lens flare.
See, this is the thing. Although I went to, I studied film at university and things like that. Mostly it was theory, very little practical stuff. So I don't know how to make a film, but I get the impression that the way they shot these films with wide lenses and the way they had to light them probably meant they got lens flare as a result of the process, because I don't think it's particularly a directorial trait, because you see it in Lethal Weapon, which is Donner, you see it in Die Hard, which is McTiernan, and I don't think those things pop up in their other films, like, for instance, Predator. I don't believe there's a lot of lens flare in Predator, not that I'd imagine there would be. And I don't think Richard Donner had that in Superman or Goonies either. Maybe, I don't know. So either it's an 80s affectation or it seems to be a product of a look they get when they film in that lens, in that light. I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing here. But again, I like it because, again, it seems to be one of those things that you associate with films of this era. You've got the wide angles, you've got the lens flare, you've got the kind of darks contrasting against the pops of especially when you've got like the police. Every time you see a police scene in these films, they look exactly the same. It's night.
Oh yeah.
There's black vans. There's red and blue light swirling that lights the scene. And there's always some angry bastard on a phone.
It's that classic shot, isn't it? Yeah, the guy on megaphone. It's always that classic shot in Die Hard, isn't it? When he's called the police and they're coming down the road and then they turn back. He's like, no, and it's the same shot they kind of deploy in this, where you see the cops coming, that wide shot, they're coming down. It just kind of works. It's great visual storytelling.
I love the fact that they did just do the blow up because in Die Hard it's the truck that they blow up from the window, and this was the helicopter they blow up with. And what I love about it is in both those films, you'd expect more horror and, you know, people being distraught and upset, but it's always some guy just banging the top of a car, you know, as if like Wile E. Coyote goes, "Oh, I've got to do another Acme plan now." You know, it feels like that because again, it's about. I mean, the one.
Do you think the police are more intelligent in this movie than they are in Die Hard?
Oh, you know what I mean.
Because they're kind of written in a way to be a little bit more. There's definitely a lot of friction there in the first Die Hard, where they just do it. They're not listening to McClane. They're doing their own thing. Their egos in full swing, and they think they can handle the situation, but it all goes tits up. In this case, there isn't any sort of ego at play. It's just like the guy's like, "I've got this under control, don't worry." But also, he's still corrupt. You know, his powers boost. You know, he's got a second-hand, you know, right-hand man. In this
guess that's your little twist. I guess that.
Yeah, that is a twist. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We probably had comments early on going, "You idiots!" You know,
well, that was the twist. We knew the twist, and that's the twist. We told you. Just on our own meta twist. You know what, it's interesting because like you look at Die Hard 3 for example, and the police are nothing but sympathetic and helpful throughout that, and that is a big reason why that film works as well as it does, because yes, it is Bruce Willis on his own, but the scope of the actual problem is impossible for him to deal with, so it delegates successfully to the city, and that's why that film's got such a rich identity. It's such a great New York film.
Definitely, yeah. I love its kind of everyone comes together to help this, to sort this out. It isn't just McClane by himself again, but and he's got Samuel Jackson along his side, which is kind of you needed. I think obviously at that point you needed another character to come in to help McClane, you know, because he's not Superman. You know, he needs someone there with him, and it sort of works better, and you get interesting banter and dialogue as a result of that.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting because I think there's just enough of them together to make the relationship work, but it does give Bruce Willis enough "you're on your own, buddy" to make it a Die Hard film. It straddles that line successfully, which 4 and 5 didn't do. And I think in this case, at this point in the story, everything's familiar, and you are at that point now where he has to go on the offensive because he's been kind of on the defensive at this point. And so he needs to now start taking charge. And I think that was a bit weird, that shot, to be fair, where he throws it at the mirror, because I thought, honestly, it was about to become Poltergeist. It was just weird.
It was a bit of it's a very carefully timed throw, wasn't it? Just like, it wasn't like a proper, aggressive lunge.
That was definitely take 76 where they were tired of putting up the new glass. It was, I think that was that. Just going briefly back to, the success of a hero. It's like, you look at Stallone, built like a brick shit house. Everyone knows he's, Rambo, and all these super. So when you get to cliffhanger, the only reason I think that works is because the amazing first 3 minutes of that film, the rescue on the tightrope, which is, that's
so intense.
That's what I miss from that films, and the 90s did it really well. You look at Scream, you look at Speed, you look at Cliffhanger. They have a riveting beginning, and you're hooked from those points on. You don't really get that anymore. Not to the same extent, not narratively to the same extent, because
it's that kind of Bond opening, isn't it? Sort of, it's that if the Bond film doesn't grip you, it's kind of if the opening act sometimes it didn't really play into the main story, but if that opening act won you over, you're going to be on board. That's
what works. In Stallone's case in that film, in Cliffhanger, it's a psychological impairment that stops him from, being a hero at the beginning because he's had his wings clipped. So you can buy him being built because his job requires him to be fit, but psychologically, can he deal with what's about to happen?
Yeah, he's kind of broken, isn't he?
Yeah, and because you've got Michael Rooker relationship.
In this case, we don't have a man who's I suppose kind of in depression, but I think he's lost confidence. He's not a broken man. I think he's just lacks the confidence now to do it. But now he's having to sort of pull that back in and try and be who he once was.
It's always funny, isn't it, when you get these stories of man in profession doesn't save someone's life in that profession, it cripples them and they're distraught. But what it takes to get over that is they have to kill 17 strangers in a serious terrorist position to save a child or to save the president's daughter. There's always an overcorrection in dealing with their psychology.
It's like at the end of the movie, he's like, "Oh, I feel all right now."
Yeah. Oh, that was just the therapy I needed.
his body bags behind him.
It's like, oh, you come in and you go, oh, I'm a doctor and I've had some real terrible times at A&E recently. And your doctor goes, well, I've prescribed you a Die Hard weekend. You'll be locked into a building with 7 terrorists with real weaponry, and you'll be asked to fight your way out to save the life. And that usually clears things up.
Could I just have a pill, doctor? No.
No. This has been highly successful. I've got John McClane here. He was from New York. He did all right after this. You've got a whole list of success stories.
I love that Powers Booth, that what triggers these bombs, well, he's got a fake one, which is basically a lighter.
Yeah.
He's got this massive remote control that's actually a lighter. Why would he make this? Why would he do this? This elaborate prank. I think, this would be a good gag. I'll do this on the people later on.
Yeah. And this is the other thing as well. It's like, you've got a guy dealing with a bomb, right? I can't remember his name. I didn't want to say John McClane. It's Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, Darren McCord, he's called.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the other problem. Maybe the name wasn't successful. That's why no one lingers. No one remembers the Daryl trilogy or whatever, Darren trilogy. But like, how do you successfully take a guy and put him in a situation where he's got to defuse a bomb and sell it? And so I think why it works is because you see the game Powers Booth is playing with the control. I think it makes it more of a game. So you're right. I mean, I don't know if was that a real bomb he defuses.
Well, I think I believe so. It wasn't like a dummy bomb. It's like he has to just unscrew it and cut the wires. But I mean, it shows you the process of how he does it.
Yes,
which kind of makes it sort of believable that kind of somewhat knows what he's doing. Where it's all at this point, it's all guesswork for him. He's just lucky that didn't go off, but then he just repeats the same process like, I don't know, 5, 6 more times.
It's funny. It's like, considering how many games were based on Van Damme movies, I'm surprised this didn't get one because I thought it would have been a good one.
Oh, it'd been great, wouldn't it? Yeah. Well, they did Die Hard trilogy, didn't they? That should have just been that, on a PlayStation or Saturn.
Van Damme trilogy, where you can do a game based on this, do a game based on Time Cop.
Oh, there was a game based on Time Cop. It is
Oh.
atrocious. Absolutely. It's FMV, sorry. Digital sprites on a platforming style game.
That's always ugly.
It's bad.
Bless. Yeah. This little moment here as well, where Van Damme's used the sign to talk to the cops.
That's right,
is a nice little moment as well, because again, it's that creative thinking. It's that thing that shows they're thinking better than the villain.
Yes.
To do one over on them. And,
yeah.
And at this point of the plot, now we're halfway through, it is about how do you not just have the cops storm the building? And so you've got to come up with ways to keep them at bay.
And that's what they did by having the detective be corrupt.
No,
that's it. Or part of the. I suppose not a detective. He's part of the FBI, isn't he? Something like that.
Yeah.
Hallmark is, but I mean, he's Secret Service, isn't he? He claims he's part of the Secret Service.
That's right. Yeah. There's always that as well. The guy who comes in with the badge and goes, "I'm in charge here," but they're the bad guys.
The other guys come in and go, "Wait a minute, we're in charge here."
Die Hard 2. The twist in that, when you realise that the paramilitary, whoever's been brought in, are actually working for William Sadler, is one of my favourite twists in an action film.
Oh yeah, they're shooting blanks.
Yeah.
It's great when McClane just points at the airport security guy and just starts shooting at him. He's like, "Ah!"
Would not happen today.
Yeah.
Would not happen today at all. That's what makes Die Hard quite quaint in many respects. Is that you go, yeah, none of that would happen these days. Absolutely none of it. And then again, I don't know. It's Die Hard 2 is a funny one because I've always felt it was more like a Bond film than a Die Hard film, mainly because of the snow speed chases and the massive amounts of gunfire and the waves of terrorists. But I do remember that film feeling shocking when I saw it, especially when they bring down the jumbo jet, which always feels like in a film like that's the feign, that's the bit where you think it's going to be happening, but it doesn't because John McClane saves the day.
There was this kind of discussion, I think, at the time. There was a lot of mean-spirited kind of sequels where we had RoboCop 2, Predator 2, and Die Hard 2, which were kind of a little bit. They were obviously 18-rated movies, but they were tonally a bit mean-spirited. And I think Die Hard 2 kind of can be lumped into that in some regard.
No, it definitely can, because I remember it. Look, I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure it was released originally as a 15 in the UK, and then when it had a DVD re-release, it was 18 because they put all the there was more violence in. Like, you saw him stab the guy in the eye with the icicle. I think it was kind of half implied by editing.
I think it did get an 18 when it came out on tape.
Yeah,
I think it did have cuts made.
It is a nastier film, definitely. It's more emphasis on close-ups of squibs going off on people's knees and arms and neck, you know.
Oh yeah, squibs on these. Oh,
that shot always goes through me.
I felt that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I do like how Van Damme's created this new weapon. We just saw a minute ago where it's like a pressurized tube he's got as up his sleeve, which he fires these kind of rusty darts out, which is really cool. Which he gets to use now when he tries to do that old trick where I've got the most powerful explosive in the world. The guy's like, "Dah."
Yeah,
I pulled that trick before.
But that's why this character works, because it's not just brute force. For instance, you want to compare him to Gerard Butler in Olympus Has Fallen, and he's basically, you know, the Tasmanian Devil from Looney Tunes, but with a gun. That's kind of his character in that film. Whereas this isn't a mean-spirited film like some of those. You know, it's
no, it's not at all. No, because it's played with sense of humour. Because the villain itself, who is in a classic stereotype villainous way, he plays it. He's not trying to reinvent you know, the wheel on the villains of action cinema. He's doing exactly what they want him to do, and he's playing it over the top. He's being humorous as well.
It's a playful film, isn't it? It's strange how despite everything, it's not a nasty watch. Like, you know, there's a lot of films that Van Damme made that were reasonably gritty and nasty and a bit too much at times, but this is almost cuddly compared to even Die Hard. It's probably quite cuddly.
Well, it's got the heart to it at the end, you know, because when he impersonates the hockey sort of goalkeeper, where he communicates with his son with sign language by saying "I love you," and the music swells up and stuff. So it's got the heart there, and he's there. You know, all he's doing is trying to save his kids, and a result of all that, he saves everyone else.
Yeah,
but kind of, you know, it's a good sort of narrative for him. Good arc.
Yeah, and I also think the interesting thing about this is the building is interesting in itself. People talk about how in Die Hard the building is itself a character, and I think that's really true in that film. There's only a few films I would ever put that to, because I think people overuse it, but like I would always say, like the original The Haunting by Robert Wise, that house is definitely a character in that film.
Yes.
And in this, I'm not going to compare it to those, but at least the variety of the environments makes it an interesting place to run around in. Because I think these films also need to be successful in that... Okay, so confession time. When I was a kid with GCSE Media Studies, we made a little short film, and we did a thing called Class Elite, which is about terrorists taking over our school, and only the plucky kids could save the day, right? But it was awful, by the way. Giving our teachers fake guns to use to pretend to be terrorists, it was a mistake. But we did it because we got to shoot in the school after it closed, and we could run around in all the little cubby holes and all the bits we couldn't go in. And I think there's a little bit of play to Die Hard clones, where if you feel you'd have fun running around in the building blowing stuff up, it's probably a good Die Hard clone.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Which I think you can't really do on the airplane ones, because they're so limited in space. Because even Passenger 57, they come off the plane twice, I think. I can't remember. They land and then they do something and then they get back on and land at a fairground for no reason. And then Executive Decision is mostly a kind of it's a thriller, really. I'd never call it a Die Hard knockoff, because it more plays.
Yeah, that was one of those weird movies where a lot of Seagal fans had to all walked out 10 minutes into the movie after he's killed off.
You know, that's one of the few moments I'd say he did the right thing by turning up to be in it and then getting out early. Because again, that is the scene. It's a bit like The Rock, you know, because in The Rock you have Michael Biehn and he's meant to be the hero, and in this case it's Steven Seagal, but they're offed quickly, and then the nerd, Kurt Russell playing the nerd, weird, and Nicolas Cage both have to step up, you know, to fill that roles. But where Executive Decision works is because it's definitely a kind of a thriller. It's biding its time until it gives you the action at the end. It's not running around, because that film shows you that you can't run around in a plane. I like the fact that they're sneaking underneath. So this is a great playground. It's a hockey rink. It's a fantastic playground.
Yeah. And this is obviously now the twist is now revealed, isn't it?
Yes.
He's revealing that he's disarming all of Power Spoo's bombs, and he's not going to be able to finish his plan in time.
Yeah, and I kind of remember when I first watched this not being surprised by this twist, but maybe it's because I was primed because of the genre, because of the formula.
Yeah.
And I say this, Powers Booth is great in this. And one of the biggest regrets, I think, in Hollywood history is that he never played a villain against Columbo. Peter Falk and him going at it would have been a great 90 minutes of my time.
Powers Booth, I remember being really kind of terrified of him in that film U-Turn.
Oh, God,
the Stone movie. Yeah, it's a really kind of harsh movie. It's quite, very dark. And it's like a comical version of it, So, I mean, Powers Booth sadly passed away, didn't he? Not long ago.
Not too long ago, yeah.
Yeah, it was a shame.
Yeah, it's just, it's again, like we said it earlier, the success of these films is largely on the villain as well.
Yeah,
and you're counting down to the fact that you want him to get his just desserts.
Yeah, definitely.
My mom and dad don't live together.
There was, what I read online, there was a talk of a sequel, which never happened because due to, they say, this kind of movie underperformed. We did like 84 million worldwide, which is pretty good.
Yeah, especially
up
96.
Up against a sort of $30 million plus budget. I mean, I think it was obviously clearly a big hit on home video and outside the USA. But now there is a sequel coming out called Welcome to Sudden Death with Michael J. White.
Right.
Which is apparently, it said online that the release date was like June on Netflix, but there's no trailer.
No.
I've seen one picture of Michael J. White wearing this kind of the same outfit as Jean-Claude, and it's supposed to be a kind of an action parody kind of comedy, maybe in line with the original art concept
Did they
of this movie.
find the original script and dust it off and just go, here you go?
Yeah, exactly. I'll happily watch that because Michael J. White is great, and
I don't know too much about him. What else has he done?
when I was younger, he was in things like Spawn. He was
yes. It suddenly clicked into place.
Yeah, tons of action movies.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you see, this is the problem. You see, when they're going to make a remake to this, and it looks, at all intents and purposes, a reboot, you think to yourself, it is just a die-hard clone anyway. You are basically copying a copy. It's like taking a VHS because you've taped off Sky, and then you've given that mate to you, and he can copy, Down Out in Beverly Hills for no reason as well. It's that sense of you. By the time you've got a copy, it's like it's degraded. So, what is it trying to sell itself on other than?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there wasn't much of a sort of synopsis on this kind of intended sequel. So, I mean, I'm intrigued to see what they do with it. I mean, it's not just like a slapdash kind of put together quickly job, but that may be the case. I don't know. With the recent release of a new Doom movie by Universal Pictures, which was clearly done to keep hold of the license, but just slapped out really quickly on a tiny budget. I do love this moment. This is kind of comic book moment coming up in a minute. He's burnt the guy, and then he runs away, and then he comes back, and he just appears. And he's got his kind of poor makeup slapped on his face. It's like a piece of ham.
Yeah, they needed their Cole moment, didn't they? They needed that bit where he throws the towel off, the smoking towel, and then it's that one. It's the action movie equivalent of one last fright in a horror film. It's that.
Yes.
It's that. Here he is. Hey. I also quite like.
Oh, knees him right in the balls.
I also quite like the idea that maybe an audience of men watching this jumped like they were watching a horror film at that point.
All scream like girls. Ah!
Yeah.
But there's this moment here with the use of red. It just reminds me of Aliens when they're in the tunnel where the power goes off when the aliens come through the ceiling.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. It's exactly that almost.
It is, isn't it?
It's interesting though because that's. Again, we talk about these films that are kind of plain and knockoff and flatly shot. Like, Anna Nicole Smith's Skyscraper, for example, whatever the bloody film was called. But this does have visual flair in it. It obviously has to signify as a film made in this era. But you look at something like that, and it's, again, I don't want to sound like an idiot, but it's a directorial choice. The scene is saying something. We're looking at the fact that it's red. He's in below the building. It's hell. He's in his worst position. And so there is some visual narration going on.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Also, that's what the other thing was reminding me of: Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, all the piping. And stuff. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a bit like how they photographed it in Freddy vs. Jason.
Yes.
Very similar sort of use of lighting.
I enjoy that film. I'm going to put that on record. I don't know why that's the hill I want to die on. And this is the other famous, I say famous, but the other nice little trope of Die Hard films where the villain and the hero talk over a phone or a walkie-talkie.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Always nice.
It plays into like Star Trek 2, where you got Captain Kirk and Khan, who never come face to face. They're just communicating via each spaceship.
I love that as well. That's something that people forget about Star Trek 2. Is that, I mean, you mentioned it as well in the video, and it is a submarine movie basically. It's Hunt for Red October. It is it's that kind of thing.
Definitely,
and I love it. Although, it is sad they don't get a scene actually together.
Yeah.
But, people complain that how...
You want a classic punch 'em up, like Shatner always did in the TV show. Which they do in the third one with
Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Lloyd having a punch up with Shatner, and he's kind of, it looks like he's wearing a blouse, isn't he?
Yeah.
In the third one.
It's airy, though. It's nice airy, let a lot of air through. It was nice.
Smashing blouse he's got.
Beautiful. Here we go. Here's the moment now where it's personal. You know what I mean? It was personal before, but now
it's like trailer fodder dialogue, isn't it?
It's more personal. Oh dear. Was that? Oh no, the vice president isn't a bad guy. Why did I think he was also a bad guy? Why did I just presume everyone's a bad guy in these films? I don't know.
I love the bit though, because when the vice president's like, you can't do this, you can't shoot him, he's got a wife and kids, and he goes, oh, shut up, he's just campaigning.
Yeah. And there you go, threaten a child, that's how you do it. And now you know he's bad. If it isn't for the the murder of innocents along the way, now that he's threatening a child who's got glasses on, now you know.
It shows that he's a proper villain, isn't he?
Yeah, and you know what? There's always a moment in these films where like you just get excited for the end. You get excited for the house of cards the villain has built falling down completely, and that's satisfying. And I think this is again another good one.
That's what Roger Ebert said. It's like the last, I think 10-20 minutes were just like for him made up for the sort of formulaic approach to it in comparison to its Die Hard roots.
Robert Ebert's a funny guy to me. I respect and understand him and everything, but the number of times I've disagreed on film reviews he's done, like Die Hard is the example where he hated Die Hard.
He was frustrated by the sort of stupidity of the policeman.
And he goes, and that ruined the film for him. But I kind of thought, really though, did it though? Really? I can't imagine it really did. It felt like it was just a thing that narratively he didn't like personally, and it just bugged him more than anything else. Whereas the way I see it, although the cops are incompetent, they never get in the way of the story. And in fact, the way the story's built is that their incompetence is kind of what allows Bruce Willis to do his thing. John McClane.
Yes.
Because you need to have that. If they were competent, you wouldn't have a film. So you need something there.
Yeah, you need a sort of kind of tropes there in place, don't you, to things to sort of make things work narratively. I think in the case of Roger Ebert, as I've been doing YouTube for so long, I've used Roger Ebert as a reference to things because at the time, in terms of how films were sort of reacted to, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert are the biggest critics in the USA.
Yeah.
And I would happily use Barry Norman as a reference, but the BBC don't put anything out. They're complete. They like to keep everything in an archive. You've got to pay for it. Can't have any of that. So you have to rely on people uploading old clips of the film show. So in the case of Roger Ebert, I think many of these movies that we loved growing up as kids, seeing these films, as an adult watching them, they were probably were silly and they were a bit. You could see the problems because film critics watch 100 movies a week.
Yeah.
So they're kind of used to that. So some of our favourite movies have been panned by some of these critics, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a reflection at the time, which I think is just an interesting, look back how films were reacted to at the time. So it's not a complete shock to me when I see they hated Blade Runner at the time, because a lot of people were confused by it.
It feels more like knee-jerk because obviously they have to produce the content, the review, and oftentimes I wonder if they should go back a year later after the film's release and watch it again and give it a different review, or
Roger Ebert changed his opinion on in the case of Blade Runner. In fact, he made a mistake. I think he's done it a couple of times on some other films, but he
jumping on that
sticks to his guns.
Blade Runner bandwagon, pathetic. That's what I think. He saw everyone else was like it, and he went, "I want to like it too."
It's not fair.
It's not
Yeah,
fair.
exactly.
But I don't know. Again, I watch a number of reviews, and I'd say I don't want to know why you're angry about that. I can't understand why you're so upset about this.
Well, the funny is that Gene Siskel's review of Time Cop's glorious because he just like he wanted to see more Van Damme's bum, you know, in the film. It's like, what's he on about? You know, just for the ladies to watch because in this film Van Damme keeps his clothes on.
Yeah,
once,
well.
know. There's always a bum shot, isn't it, in a Van Damme movie?
Always.
Generally.
But the fact that he remembered that and specifically pointed it out is what is worrying. It's like, lovely bum, 2 thumbs up. It's like, wait, what message am I getting here? Now, this is a really goofy moment in the film, and I think this is where it strains its, believability somewhat, just to get him on the ice.
Oh, yeah.
Because I do think when this was being pitched, whoever wrote it, or certainly conceived the story, must have had a checklist of things that have to happen in a film set in an ice hockey game. And one of them is extra time, countdown, last minute shot. One is hero on the ice. There has to be an ice hockey moment. Because that's the strange thing. You've got this action film going on, and the hardest part of the conceit is not letting the people watching the match know what's going on for as long as possible.
Yeah. So it all becomes this huge shock when the body falls from the top and smashes into the massive display, with the score points, and that's a massive shock to the audience.
And weirdly, for a villain who wants money, to base it on the clock of the game is also stupid. Because you're going to have overtime, and you're going to have wriggle room or stops and plays and fouls and things.
Oh, yeah, transferring the cash. Oh, we lost a connection. Oh, damn it. Got to dial in again.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing as well, is that we just take it as read that everything works until it has to not work anymore. And that's the same for the narrative. This has to keep everyone enjoying the match.
Yeah.
Because, there's cops outside and buildings blowing up and a helicopter just blew up, and I refuse to believe no one in the thing didn't hear that.
This is great, this bit coming up, because I love the manager of the hockey team.
Yeah.
Guy with a moustache, and he's like, when Van Damme's, he saves the day, he saves the shot, catches it in the goal. He does his whole sign language thing. Now he's got to get off the ice hockey rink. He's got to, so he goes up to a guy and just punches a random dude, and the manager's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Well, it's a wonderful scene.
Yeah, it's a lovely little scene. It's because it's dumb. It is dumb, but it's dumb in a really kind of, again, heartwarming way. It's kind of like, look, let's just have fun. Do you want to have fun? Let's just have fun. And this is this film saying that we've got real stakes, but we do need you to remind you that this is about Jean-Claude Van Damme saving terrorists at an ice hockey game.
There's always a scene when I used to play NHL hockey on the Mega Drive. The only thing you'd want to do really is get into a punch-up.
Yeah.
With those games, I always thought they were quite boring.
Until you have a fight.
Let's have a fight. Go on, fight.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's also such an American thing to do as well. I mean, maybe it's more Canadian. I didn't actually think.
Because for us, so Paul, like, hockey was just played hockey not on ice but on grass. At school.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to play with the girls who'd hack your shins to bits, like trying to get the ball off you.
Well, this is the scene. This scene is like, again, the action movie equivalent is like in a comedy is when the good guy's running away from the bad guy, and the only way they can get away is if they go on stage and sing a song and dance moment in front of 100 people. It's the blues song in Adventures in Babysitting. It's that kind of moment.
It'd be a moment in, like, for Under Siege, where a random scene, like a sequel, where Steven Seagal's got to get out of it, and he just jumps onto like the Bake Off and has to make a cake quickly to get away from the villains. It's a nice
distraction moment. It's always adorable in those kind of films that you see that. And I remember, this is a tangent, but I do remember falling in love with Elizabeth Shue in that very moment where she sings the blues in Adventures in Babysitting. Or A Night on the Town. I don't know what it was called in the UK. I think it was called A Night on the Town in the UK.
I think, what was it? Oh, okay.
And then it was called Adventures in Babysitting everywhere else.
Oh, that's weird. I didn't know they did a switcheroo of the title.
I'm vaguely remembering because I think I had a poster, because I used to have a friend who ran a video shop near me, and she would give me posters once they were done with, and so I had and it had on A Night on the Town. Pretty sure it was called Night on the Town. Yeah. God, I got a load of posters. My favourite movie poster, again, tangent, sorry, was she gave me the movie poster for House, and I love House. The horror film, William Catt.
Oh yes, with the hand.
The hand ringing the doorbell.
Yeah.
My mum hated that, but I loved that poster.
I used to have a Moonwalker poster when I was a kid on my wall.
Well,
Michael Jackson looking over you.
I had this poster as well on my wall for sudden death.
Oh, nice, good man.
Again, I just took any freebie and put it up in my room at that time.
I had the Shadow poster as well. Yeah, that was a good one.
See, all those again. That's another lost art.
Because they come in magazines. Even like a movie magazine will give you like an A3 size poster would come with it. So you just put that on the wall.
Yeah.
that was always loads of them.
That was how I papered my bedrooms back in the day. It was just all movie posters nicked from video shops.
This is the heartfelt moment, isn't it?
Yay.
Where the son realizes, oh my god, my dad is out there playing ice hockey, and in fact, the entire film, his son has had literally no respect for his father.
Absolutely none.
Shit.
I would have left him to suffer.
Yeah, definitely. I would have shaved his head as well. Got rid of that awful bowl of hair.
Yeah. What else was he in? Was that kid in Home Alone 3 or 4 or something? No, the one who plays the son.
No, he's not in Home Alone films. No.
Oh, he looks like the kind of kid who would be in a Home Alone film.
I think he basically did a lot of TV work. As there are obviously gaps in his career for education, things like that. But I think, things like Roseanne he did, and then later on, Party of Five.
Ah, yes.
Things like that. So it pops up in random bits and bobs.
God, I love that bit. It's such a nice little. This is a lovely little scene in general. It works. It's cute. He causes the fight to, again, another distraction to get off the ice. Before it's over, before you doubt how daft it is.
Yeah. And then obviously when he goes back into the changing room and gets out of the gear, he I actually feel sorry for the guy here. Just gets blasted in the stomach with his machine gun. What the hell?
Yeah. he could have done that hockey hit before he shot the guy.
He broke that hockey stick on a guy's neck. I think he'd be dead. But obviously they're throwing some bit more martial arts where there's a great scene where the guy tries to grab Van Damme from behind. He just turns around, does this sort of jump kick and kicks him into the wall. So it's quite sort of a bit more sort of dynamic fight scenes kicking off for the third act.
Yeah,
and
because again, you got to keep raising the stakes. You've got to keep making things a little harder for them every time.
Yes, the editing begins to pick up its pace as well. There's faster edits.
I've noticed that. Yeah,
to get the momentum going because it's all a countdown now, isn't it?
It's very breathless at this time, and this could often be like where a film drops the ball. Because when...
Oh, yeah.
Because like when you see a film where a bomb's going to go off in 5 seconds, but it takes 15 seconds for that to play out.
Yeah.
These...
I always do that when I see a film. When I've got a timer, I'm counting on my watch. How long is it going to take? It's got 5 minutes on the clock. It takes 5 minutes. I'm like, yes, that is good attention to detail. But it takes 10 minutes. I'm like, no.
It's like that scene in... Is it Mission Impossible... 4 or 5 where he has to hold his breath under the water as he's changing the data bank. It's like, oh no. I was having panic attacks 1 minute into that scene. It was just... It's like, I love those Mission Impossible movies completely, except 2. I can't stand 2. But
same here.
I have a problem where it's like those films, when they're done really well, are like having controlled anxiety attacks. If they're done brilliantly, you should have not realised you've held your breath for 3 or 4 minutes during those sequences.
Yeah, well, that last Mission Impossible, that whole helicopter sequence was just like breathtaking. On IMAX, it's like whoa.
Yeah,
that's when action movies really can work.
Yeah, this is the difference between those films and the one and Sudden Death is that there's almost a purity to them in the same way that I think Hollywood looks at westerns, I guess. Is that these are a bygone age, bygone heroes, bygone stories. What tends to change is how the narrative is presented because of special effects and direction and camera trickery and 3D and 4D and whatever it takes to sell the same story again.
This is a great moment where he just goes through the steam room and just appears out of nowhere and grabs him.
Oh, yeah.
I think he does a drop kick, doesn't he, on him? That's it.
I think they are rushing through the location somewhat at this point. It's like, what room haven't we done? The gym. Right, we do a shoot out there. Next room. Oh, it's the workbench. Right, we'll do a quick shoot out there. It's like Double Dragon. Got different rooms they go to. And there's a different bad guy there waiting for him.
Oh yes, spot on. This is like mid-level boss, isn't it? Or something.
This is like Streets of Rage or something. It's like, and also it's like Casualty. You watch these things and you go, right. is he going to get his hand ripped off on the bandsaw, or is he going to get garroted with the box cutter? Or it kind of goes to that playground thing again. It's horrific, but it's got that sense of, oh, you can kill a man with a cucumber. It's whatever.
Well, if it was playing in true casualty fashion, that villain would have said earlier on, "Oh, my hand feels a bit funny today. I hope I don't hurt it." And then suddenly it would get.
This is my money-making hand. This hand will get my kids through college. Cut to.
This is a great moment because I think, the bomb's going to go off. Everyone starts moving around to stop him, and then they score. It's tie.
Yeah, which is again one of those minutes where why would that be your threatening gambit as a terrorist, to judge it all on the random nature of like a moment like this? It's like, if I was him, wouldn't you just blow it up anyway? Otherwise, it's like I get it. It's like narrative, it's story, it's blah blah blah. I
think he obviously needs it. Obviously, the film just said sudden death. Oh my god, the name of the film in the film.
Yay.
Is this because he's also, because the money's still transferring, so he does need more time.
Okay. I guess if he sets a bomb off, then they'd just stop the payment.
Yeah, but it's.
And then they'd storm the building and shoot him, and hundreds would die.
We're ruining the movie. No.
I get the impression that some of these films are kind of manufactured backwards. Like, they know what they want their finale to be in some respects, and they have to work back from then to get to the point. And they know the formula works enough that kind of story will write itself.
Yeah, some writers do that, you know, especially with action. You got to start at the end and work your way backwards.
It's sometimes why a lot of films of this era kind of fell on their arse, because their best action sequences in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's true. You don't want the biggest. That's the thing I sort of criticise for the film Daylight with Stallone, where the opening sequence it blows its load like in the first 10 minutes, and then how are you going to top that?
You
They can't.
You have a slow-paced Poseidon Adventure-esque, disaster movie.
Yeah,
and well, then that was that whole weird period as well in the 90s where like they were just remake giving old formulas a new lick of paint. So you had disaster movie was huge in the 90s. You had all of those Dante's Peak and Volcano and God knows what else. And I think and
then you had TV shows being turned into films with the Avengers and Mission Impossible.
Oh yeah,
The Saint,
Adam's Family.
That sort of random, that random craze.
God, there was loads of them on reflection. It's like I often look back at the 90s as a kind of
the Brady Bunch, things like that.
Yeah, the 90s was a strange time for cinema, I think, because it was adjusting from old school Hollywood techniques to CGI and things like that. And I think a lot of this is one of the reasons why I think people like Van Damme have their day in the sun and then struggle to get that back again, unless they're just workhorsing it through B movies. In that, I think they just work just right for that time. And however many years that is, who knows? But very, very few of them. Even Schwarzenegger's proven that his time was very specifically between 83 and maybe 96, and that was it. Because you look at the films he's done since, and even though some of them have been really good, the Terminators were misguided. In my opinion, I loved the zombie one he did. I can't remember the name of, but it was a drama.
Oh, it was Mandy, wasn't it? Was it Mandy or Maggie?
Maggie, I don't know.
I think it was Maggie.
But they have their time in the sun, and I think films like this can't be made now without being seeming deliberately derivative.
The thing is that these movies that were considered big blockbusters of their time, the action genre has become essentially niche. So action is still very much prevalent in modern movies today, as we see with the Marvel movies. All the sort of summer blockbusters incorporate action, but they're not considered action movies of that genre. They're considered like superhero movies or just... Well, they are called action movies, but they're not in the traditional sense. So the traditional ones we love are either we get the John Wicks, we get the or we get the sort of stuff for Netflix, streaming.
And they tend to be. I mean, this is the weird thing: is that it's like back in this era, what you got was B movies made with A movie budgets. That was kind of what differentiated itself. You could strip the budget of this, and this film would still get made, and it would look awful, and it would star someone who used to be in Stargate. It'd be that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But now, but they're locked into that because Netflix have this habit of making awful B-movie plots with huge casts and budgets and things like that, which you just go, it's the B movie element has become exaggerated to the point where it's kind of awful, and then the money up front to make it look like an A grade movie is so disgusting that they're kind of pushing themselves apart. Does that make sense? It's like the extremes are too far now. So you look at, like, was it a Sky One movie, or it was basically sudden death but set at a West Ham match, and it had Dave Bautista in.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing.
But it's basically exactly sudden death but set at a football match in I think it's West Ham.
They could easily, imagine if they did an action movie set in like when the Olympics are on, you know, and all this is going off, but then it'd be a complete derivative of sudden death, you know. It's called penalty shootout or something. Or like...
I'm pretty sure it's like the Dave Bautista one's called something like penalty time, or, you know, whatever phrase.
Offside.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Offside. Although that's about as far as it goes. But here we are now. This is another Die Hard moment. It's the hero on the roof and he has to jump off it moment. You know?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's great. We've got to make the sort of leap to his death, doesn't it?
Yeah, and every single one has it. You know,
but you've got a great moment. I love this moment because it sort of plays into sort of the hero being seen by the public. Yeah, who's been, you know, he's seen from a distance. You don't see him up close, and you see him. You see Jean-Claude jump onto that sort of harness, and he glides down, and he drops, you know, onto that sort of massive lampshade that's dangling, and but everyone stands up and points. They can see him, and then he just throws the bomb, and it all goes, and the music all builds up into this kind of triumphant moment, and I think it's wonderfully executed.
Yeah, this is basically the money shot moment. Is this the one you put right at the end of the trailer without context? This is the one that makes you go, oh bloody hell, I need to see this. And when you get to it in the movie, you have to make it work. You can't just presume that the fireworks is enough. This does it really well because, again, you've at this point in the film just about bought that he's an everyman. He's not quite, but you know he's not going to easily take down these criminals like Steven Seagal does in Under Siege 2, where
he's not going to give everyone a Chinese burn, is he? You know, or fight them with a knife.
And this is a lovely shot as well. This
oh yeah,
this is a wonderful shot, which again shows the director knows the narrative of what he's trying to tell here. He wants to show the drop. He wants to show the people at risk, the bomb, everything in one shot, and it shows that there is some care in this.
There is the trailer for the movie. There's one of the trailers that incorporates the Beethoven Symphony.
Ode to Joy.
Number 9, I think it's the Die Hard kind of Beethoven music, which they use, and it's like it's a bit on the nose.
Just
you know,
a bit.
You're just like, you're trying to give it away that it's a Die Hard clone. You know.
Yeah, but
if you like Die Hard, you'll love this. It's got the same music.
Yeah, and again, Die Hard has a great score as well by Michael Kamen. And that builds to that rooftop explosion beautifully. The way it all scales up, and again,
Michael Kamen wasn't really a fan of action movies and scoring. So when he approached those kind of movies, he scored it very differently to how everyone else was doing it.
Bang!
Look at that. That is great.
And now everyone knows there's a problem. Because if he'd fallen in or just on the floor and splattered on the, here we go, jump, hey!
See, everyone's reaction's great.
Yeah.
It works.
Because all of a sudden everything's going to shit now, and that's what's nice about this. I say nice, but you know what? What's effective? This is exactly what you need to give your audience at this point. The hero swinging in,
and this whole moment here, it shows. For me, it made it one of sort of Van Damme's best of the 90s. And it didn't need to be science fiction. It didn't need him to be some sort of superhero or a video game character.
Yeah.
It was just playing a guy that was down on his luck, but has to go save his kids. And it's just it's a sort of great character trait.
You know what? I would honestly believe that again, this is going to sound probably very trite, but Van Damme's always done better when he's allowed his characters to be vulnerable. Because when you look at like Street Fighter, for example, okay, I get it, it's a video game and blah blah blah, but there's no stakes in that film particularly because it feels like there's no chance in hell Van Damme won't win this, won't win the day. And again, that was a bit ropey. That little bit of
the blue screen's terrible in that bit there. He just throws like a bunch of like self-raising flour into there.
It's not exactly Breaking Bad. There's not that moment with a But I like it because this, I mean, again, it's very easy to just draw comparisons because of the narrative. But like, mentally, the audience, if they have seen Die Hard, is seeing this as the scene where he jumps off the building, gets dragged off by the helicopter, the Christmas tree blows up, he stumbles into the final confrontation. It is there, and it's comforting, which is probably another reason why I like this. It's a comforting knockoff.
Oh, definitely. With the death of Hans Gruber in the first, it was a great sequence.
Yes.
You know, as they, you know, as most people know, sort of trivia is that, you know, Alan Rickman's reaction is genuine because they let go of him before he knew. So it's wonderful. Yeah. So with this, I mean, it's a bit silly where, you know, the helicopter sort of turns backwards and it goes down slowly and explodes. It's a wonderfully shot sequence, but it's a little bit cheesy. And,
it's a little bit over edited because it feels like it takes like one whole minute for that thing to drop a couple of feet.
He's like screaming for ages. I think you go run out of breath and go
just looking at his watch. It's like the same for John Lithgow's death in a cliffhanger, but at least that is sudden and blunt. You know?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It's quick.
It's also very important that you kill your main villain off well.
Yes. He's wearing like a sort of an obvious wig. The what was it? The bit where he attempts to shoot his daughter, Powers Booster, but Van Damme jumps in the way. But you don't see him get shot. It's really weird. You see like Powers Boost kind of knock his hand, and the gun falls out of his hand, and so Van Damme can then use the gun on it.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a weird moment. You don't see him get wounded.
It feels,
but it implies he's been shot.
Yeah, because it feels like it was. They realised once they had all the footage in for the editing that they had one shot they didn't have that they needed to tell it. And so maybe that was it. They just didn't shoot that right moment. But again, you feel at this point that because of the nature of the film's just more interested now in just racing you through to the ending, which is why, as you said, the shots are shorter. You know, everything's more dynamic.
There's also, in classic Die Hard fashion, and also many action movies, it kind of abruptly ends. The kid just goes, "My daddy's a fireman," and it just ends, and it's just like credits, get out.
Bye.
You know,
we're done. we've run out of script. But again, it's
saved the day at the end.
It goes back to his kid still at the end. You know, you told me to stay here, Daddy. Yeah, good boy. You did the one thing I asked you to do. Despite not respecting me for most of the running time of this story.
No more full fat Coke for you, son. You're going on Coke Zero.
The sad thing is, the kid was so scared and did say that he had wet himself numerous times because he was afraid to go to the bathroom. So there is
like a litre of Coke, you would be busted for a piss.
He's going to have his own issues, you know. Oh, so is this another? You never know at these points if another villain's going to pop out of the woodwork.
I just wish they had a fight in the concession stand and beating people up with like massive bags of popcorn.
Yes, you know? They'll do that in the remake sequel, whatever they call it.
Oh, I hope so, man. I hope so.
They'll have. Didn't they stash all the guns in it in this? Did I imagine that plot point?
Oh, that's right. They stashed. Yeah, I think so. And they sort of they put some of the bombs, didn't they, in the penguins, didn't they?
Yeah.
On the sort of soft toys.
Yeah. Here's the weird thing: he kidnaps the daughter because plot has to happen, but he could have just like pushed her over and legged it, and he probably would have gotten away.
Yeah, and he should have stopped to look back at him, but never mind. I think, I've got your kid.
Yeah, this guy's got my kid, so I'm going to give my other kid to this other complete stranger I don't know right now.
I love everyone's clothes, all sort of baggy, checkered shirts, isn't it? Everyone should be wearing a medium, but they're wearing large outfits.
Back to the 90s for you, where baggy was good, because we all had awful bodies, because no one did exercise after the 80s craze died out. Yeah, you've got to have your rooftop escape. It's so strange. Part of me wonders, you know, like Die Hard as a genre, you fantasize about where you'd like to have it next. You watch this and you go, oh, we could easily do a Millennium Dome Die Hard, or you could do a...
Yeah.
You know? I've always thought...
Because Hollywood had this obsession, didn't they, with having many action movies set in London. Probably due to sort of, tax reductions.
These days they just blow it up.
Pinewood.
Yeah, they just blow it up with CGI scenes these days. I've not seen a scene of London in any action film in the last 15 years that didn't involve it being wiped out by some weird anomaly, you know.
They always have to destroy Parliament and Big Ben.
Always, and the Ferris wheel, that always comes down now. They have loads of things they can knock down.
Recent Spider-Man did that, didn't
yes.
it? Far From Home, which I thought was a wonderful film. But yes, another sort of... We saw this in like Fantastic Four from like 10 years earlier.
Fantastic Four. Thor did it, I think. What was that?
Independence Day 2. You know.
Yeah, God, they wrecked the joint in that one.
Roland Emmerich's like, destroy everything. I hate it.
But I
hate
think
London.
that's a great example of the difference between films of the 90s and films of now, is that fundamentally those two Independent Days films are the same. But one is quaint and charming and kind of burgeoning kind of its type, and then the third one is just the excess of what we expect at the cinema now. So I don't know.
This is the random moment here. Now he's going to shoot Van Damme. He does a sort of slow-mo jump in the way. But he sort of... The gun gets knocked for some reason.
Yeah, he just bangs it.
Yeah, and there's no gunfire.
No. So he could have...
It's weird.
He didn't have to jump in front of his kid then. He could have just roll the dice.
It implies he's been shot. It's weird.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know. It does. Yeah, no, it does look he's been shot in the shoulder. Apparently.
Yeah, he's been shot in the shoulder. Yeah.
And luckily, he
it's
just.
just a flesh wound. Just a flesh wound.
Yeah, he can climb a rope ladder dangling out of a helicopter with a open shoulder wound.
He can play a violin with that.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, you got to get him fly away. But what's he going to do? Again, this is the other thing I like is when oh, ouch. He's using the wrong arm. You're hurting yourself. Because I liked it in Cliffhanger where he thinks he's going to get away, but then he attaches the helicopters to the rope bridge and whatever, and it causes it all to fall.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All that stuff's fun. I like that. I love all this. I wouldn't have done his action where, he climbs the ladder and shoots. I would have tried shooting from where I was on a nice stable platform.
Yeah, I think so. It's still. I think it should be alright to standing still.
Also, can a helicopter fall like that? I don't know if it can.
I don't know. They actually did it for real. I mean, they loaded it into the arena. They did it on a massive crane, which is,
Yeah.
to give them credit, it's done within camera. But it's like, yeah, it's done too slowly. I think to
make it work.
Have a shock effect. But I think it's they wanted that look between them before he dies. Yeah.
Screw you, buddy. Because, it looks like it's being lowered slowly down by a crane. Because, it is. It's just like John Lithgow's face. But then, yeah, now he's screaming for ages. And you know what? They milk it and fair play. Absolutely fair play. Oh, look. Boom. Hits the lights. Boom. I love it when helicopters blow up in action films.
Oh, yeah, same.
Like End of Mission Impossible. I love that. End of Mission Impossible is one of my favourite action sequences of all time because it's been really calm and collected for most of its runtime with the stealth, and then right at the end the music ramps up. The Mission Impossible theme kicks in, and you're like, oh, I got goosebumps then. It's nice.
A theme tune kicked in. Great.
Yeah. People undervalue a successful, rousing theme tune.
Oh, they do. The studios just go, oh, it's too campy and cheesy, we're not going to do it. It's like...
Because the Avengers theme doesn't...
Don't call it a Mission Impossible film if you're not going to use it.
Yeah, no, don't at all. And don't put rock guitar over it. Oh, what a lovely explosion. And it only took 90 seconds to fall out of the sky and then blow up in 7 different angles and cuts. I love it.
This is how it kind of just abruptly ends, It's great.
Yeah, there's no... Yeah, he's all of a sudden on a stretcher. He's managed to be all right, but he's taken the stretchers to the ambulance, and his kids are with some strangers. They'll be fine. Oh, and that's a nice little shot. It's nice. But you're right, the film just goes, that's it. That'll do. That'll do nicely.
Well, that's what kind of Die Hard did, didn't it? It's always just like, I suppose Die Hard had a little bit more sort of a little finesse to it all, where he gets 1 and 2 had teamed up with his wife again.
Yeah, there was that whole
and it ends with a Christmas kind of song.
Yeah. And that's nice because I like that last 30 seconds of the chaos that is in the wake of everything that's happened. And I think that's a nice little one. You get to throw paper around the set, throw it from a crane, so everything. For some reason, when buildings blow up, they have massive stockpiles of paper. And there's always paper floating down behind these buildings. I love it.
So yeah, I mean, final thoughts for me on Sudden Death. It's one of my favourite Van Damme films. It's not one that sort of has those martial arts and stuff, which doesn't bother me at all. I think as a kid, I would probably have been like, oh, it should have been a bit more high flying kicks. But the story really sort of excels, and Van Damme just sort of displaying, more his acting chops really, instead of being just a straight faced kind of action guy who's there to save the day. He's someone who's emotional, who's there to save his kids, and explores a different side to him and his talents as an actor. I think he got better, as you say, he got better over the years, and when he was under Peter Hyams' direction, he really sort of excelled. Not to the level of, say, someone who's, I don't know, like Harrison Ford, but it's solid enough to sort of make you believe in the character.
From my point of view, Sudden Death is close to my heart because the genre in itself I love. I mean, maybe the best example of it might be The Raid, which The Raid is just breathtaking in its pace. But every now and then, it is nice to sit down, and it's like hanging out with a friend you've not seen since uni. Sudden Death is that friend you remember from uni who you used to hang out with. And they haven't changed much, and they're a bit old-fashioned in their views, but at the same time, it's like, you know what you're going to get when you hang out, and no one gets hurt.
No, yeah, definitely. That's a good analogy, I think, actually. Yeah, it's always when you bump into your old, mates from college or uni, and you think, oh, let's put on a Van Damme film. It's always going to be something like this, or Time Cop, or
it's an very easy watch. And look, I mean, it's very weird to say if you're a fan of this particular genre of this particular action film, then this comes highly recommended. But it does, because it's not pretentious. It knows exactly what it is. It knows exactly what it's saying, and it does it with enough care and attention that it sells the concept.
Oh yeah, certainly. I think it's to me, I think it is the best of the clones out of the sort of, I think there's maybe altogether maybe 6 or 7 clones of doing that period, maybe a little bit less.
I mean, yeah, it depends on where you want to go and looking on the B movie counter.
Yeah, because B movies kind of took on a lot of those sort of tropes, didn't they, of the Die Hard genre.
Because even like Beverly Hills Cop 3 was initially going to be Die Hard at a theme park, but they had to change the plot for various boring reasons.
Let's make it not funny.
Yeah, let's make it not funny and unpleasant and weird and dated, and no one wants to be there.
Yeah, especially Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy. But all these films in the 90s, this little pocket of films in the 90s where like the big names of the 80s were just about to leave us in lieu of new people, and like you can see it's like this dips down where films like Speed and Keanu Reeves' ascension to action movie star, which is amazing, but still boggles my mind to this day. Because almost I see Speed as the kind of hands across America kind of thing, where it's like not across America, but hands across 2 different divides, where it's like you got the new stars coming in and the new action films around the corner, but Speed is still very much of its era.
Yes, yes, definitely. It's 90s filmmaking with a sort of the contemporary view of bringing in actors to be action stars and not martial artists and athletes, as it were.
Because again, if you want me to understand that Dave Barrister, I keep forgetting his name, Barrister?
Dave Bautista.
Thank you. I don't know, because I keep thinking he works at Starbucks when I say that. But like, if he's going to do a Die Hard clone, I'm going to have a hard time buying that he's going to be an underdog.
It's true, because he's built like a brick shit house.
He really is. He's done really well for himself in terms of his on-screen appearance, but I don't know. I like my scrappy underdogs, not my big hunking guys who have to put up with a broken toenail as their reason to come back and revenge. I don't know.
Well, everyone, that is the end of the commentary. Hope you enjoyed it. Me and Paul will be back with some more in the coming weeks, probably.
Sounds like a threat.
Did you want to do the Ghostbusters 2016 or some possibly more Die Hard clones? What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. Part of me wants to do Ghostbusters 2016, but only because I think there's a lot to talk about. Not just Ghostbusters, but I want to talk about fandom. I want to talk about franchises. I want to talk about geek properties. There's a kind of lot I can talk about from that.
Good. Okay. Well, I think the audience will probably be very, very intrigued to see what you have to say about that, because I think it's a movie the internet has decided is awful. So
yeah,
we'll see.
And as we all know, the internet is so we'll see. We will see.
Okay. Excellent. All right, everyone. Take care and goodbye.
Take care. Bye bye.